Hello and welcome, and thank you for taking a few minutes to learn more about effective transport. In this brief demo, I'm going to focus on transport's capability to help streamline your ITSM People Data Management. Let's get started. When you think about your people data right now and how much time you spend manually making changes to it, what areas come to mind? It could be around adding and removing existing support staff or making changes to their records. It might even include adding new organizations. Let's say a new organization is coming online that will be added to Remedy and have new support staff, 50 new people, and you have to go through the process of adding them, giving them all their permissions. Maybe it's changing application permissions and functional roles for existing people, or making support group changes, which we know is on a continual basis. All of these items can be very time consuming. Let's consider this use case a little bit more. When you think about your current tools and process, it may include the out-of-the-box capability with the basic data management features that you have through UDM, or you may actually have your own current tools and process. What we have found is we have surveyed different customers and our own consultants and engineers in the field. This can be a very time-consuming process where you have to take a large group of people, support groups, or support staff with those support groups and all their application permissions and load them and then ultimately make changes to that. After you've maybe made your initial data load, from that point on, it is a very manual, time-intensive process for making those changes, let alone not only in the one environment, but making those changes across all environments. What we typically find is data admins focus on the production and server environment, and that means UAT and staging don't get the attention and don't have the data that's current on production. What I want to introduce to you from transport is a better way to manage that data that streamlines it. Effective Transport is a Remedy-based solution that installs into your Remedy environment, fully integrated with the Remedy ITSM applications, with all of its forms and workflow to validate your data as you load it, but there are no customizations added to the existing Remedy ITSM applications. That means it doesn't get in the way of your upgrade. The other benefit of the transport framework is customers really like it because they can extend its capability for other data management focuses that they have, maybe custom data forms or other areas that they've extended the applications. But let's stick with our example here and consider people data. The way it works with transport is we take a single CSV file, we can load all of our people data, we can also use LDAP. Transport ships with an LDAP capability, and we have several customers that are using it today to load via their Active Directory LDAP. And when it comes to people permissions, it is a single CSV file, and all we need to know is what is their login name or their username, corporate ID, what profile of transport do we want to apply, their support groups, and then is it an add, an overwrite, or even a remove. Inside the profiles where all the work is done, we let the application do the heavy lifting. That means when I go to load from transport, it does a look up the profile and it knows exactly what kind of permissions, functional roles, support groups, company access, and all of that can be in one profile, or you can have profiles just specifically for application permissions, functional roles, and company access. I've actually seen that approach used quite common, and we'll look at some other examples. Let me share with you a customer success story. This customer has 250,000 people records in their environment. That's a lot of data to maintain, and most of that comes in via LDAP and Active Directory. Within that 250,000, they have 9,000 support staff. Prior to having transport as a part of their practice, it could take upwards of 3 people involved in managing this data on a day-to-day basis. Now with transport, a half a person's time is required for doing this because they do all of their data loads, their large data loads, via transport. So when there's a new batch of people being added or I'm moving them around, I can use transport to bulk load that data. So we've solved the challenge of bulk updates. Great. I can load large batches of data, make people permission changes and all that, but it still leaves a gap. That gap is I have people requesting on a regular basis. They go and create a ticket, however your current process is. They create a ticket, they call someone, but that information is flowing into the service desk asking for a new support member on my team, and they need service desk permissions. I need to remove someone from a support group. I need change management access to be added to my profile. This is all manual process for an ITSM data admin. On average, if you add that up, it's about at least 30 minutes per ticket. That can consume a considerable amount of time. Now we have good news. With the release of the latest release of transport on version 5, which works with ITSM 8 and above, we now have self-service. What we include with the product when it installs is a self-service offering that you leverage based on your requirements and your data management activities. Let me walk you through in a scenario. This support manager here on the left has a new support member joining his team. And they give them the basic, access to be a work order implementer, but they now need access to change management and also as a service desk analyst as well. So in order to do that, all I have to do is go into the SRM console, find the offering, and you can restrict this offering based on entitlement. So if we only want IT to have access to it, that's great. One customer is actually implemented that way and it works well for them. Another one is open it up to a greater audience of managers, directors, those kinds of that would make the decision. However best fits, you can configure it based on the out-of-the-box capability of SRM. We include the advanced interface form that facilitates this request. That means that I can come in as their manager, SAM support now needs this access, and I see the profiles from transport that are requestable. I pick the profile, I select the appropriate support groups, add them over, I get a quick summary of what's going on. If I've forgotten what SAM currently has, I actually can view SAM's current permissions. Once I click submit, it creates a service request. You configure what kind of approval you want to be applied to this request. So it could be manager, it could be an IT service support group that validates all these requests. However you choose to approve it, that it has to follow SRM's approval process. But once the approval is completed, the work order is generated. That's when transport takes over. We have several filters watching for this data in its format, and once it finds that work order with its appropriate name and tag and all that, it takes and moves that data into the transport staging form, and it automatically updates that CTM people record for that user. I'm going to actually show this in the example in just a few minutes. This one right here has been really well received by customers that are using transport today. The savings is significant for people data management, and this is one of the key features to that. We also have the ability to remove support groups as well. Last point I want to make before we move on to the actual demo is the data migration. So let's say you want to test load some of this people support staff change data into UAT and allow them to test it. You now have an easy way of doing that. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say I have 50 new people being added and they're going to be working in configuration management. I want them to log in, validate their access. Maybe they're doing some testing. I can now ensure that the permissions that people have across these environments are consistent. That's because I can easily bulk load data with transport using what we call transport jobs. It's an easy method for bulk loading this data. It's helpful in people, support staff data, as well as the complex data that we have to load around SRM and SLM. Let's get to the demo. In this demo, I'm going to show you, first of all, how to just load some people data. Let's say you have something that's outside the scope of LDAP and I want to load that data manually. We're going to go through that process, as well as how do I update data, and then we'll move into the people permissions so we can understand the people profiles. And then finally, we'll look at the self-service capability of how we can easily update a user's record via the self-service that's deployed SRM. Let's get started. Now, just as a review from the overview of ITSM with transport, I want to just come back to projects. Everything that we do for loading data with transport is done in the context or completed in the context of a project. Now, this is really helpful because if I have many things in flight and I have several members of my team that are working on different things for my customer, which is my company, and you could be multi-tenant, so you may have all your tenants here, or you can be single tenant. Doesn't matter. We have that capability with transport. You have the ability to manage these projects. Now you can do it at a very basic level, where are the files, to even the more complex, what are the activities I want to track. And you can see in this example, the ITSM project we'll be using, we're tracking several activities in here. You define the activities you want to track, and the minimum thing that you have to do with setting up a project is, where is that data located? What server is the air server? What's the user account I'm connecting with, and where is that data? This allows us to have many things going on at the same time, and we will not conflict with one another. It gives you that data management capability. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at our data loading of people data. So now I'm wearing the hat of the data admin. I'm going to load some people data, but before we do that, let's go ahead and let's go over and access the company and look at what we have for the data. Effective Technologies is the company that we'll load data into in this example today. So what we're going to see is that I have a little bit of location data, a little bit of organization data, and a little bit of people data. Let's say this is a brand new tenant that I'm adding to my Remedy environment. I'm 3 tenants already, and there's a brand new company that we acquired, and I want to add them in. LDAP will come online later next quarter, but I need the people data today to get started. So we can quickly manually load that data, and there's a benefit that comes from loading it the first time as well. So let's go ahead and load that data. So we pick the data type of people data. We choose people. If you're tracking your activities, you can go ahead and pick the appropriate activity. And you can even log your time of how much did it take to collect the data and load it. Now, you'll notice when I picked people, it automatically knows where the file's located. It knows the default name of the file. I can change it if I want. And I'm going to go ahead and choose import and transport. Now there's the results of what we have. Now I can review the results. There was one error, so let's just go ahead and open this up. The summary is really helpful. It showed 1 failed. There were 2 with issue 16 overall. So what's going on here? Well, what we'll see here is when I drill in a few minutes why the error occurred, but I could open up the log file and it also tells me total time to load. So if you have a very large data load that's occurring, this is really helpful as well. Now, the error I intentionally inserted into my data sample today. I want you to see what happens when transport encounters a data load error. It does not stop the data load, doesn't slow it down. It just flags that record that I can quickly drill into it. And once I open up the records that have errors, I can even search for them and look at them. I will go through the error message and I can look at it and say, oh, that's right, I forgot to include the user ID and the corporate ID. That means I left out some data. I need to fix this. So I can let whoever it is that's collected that data fix the issue, or I can go and fix it in the file myself. Bottom line is that transport solves the data validation for you right at your fingertips. So a data admin is not slowed down in the process. They can get the data right in to the environment and go ahead and validate it within a Remedy application such as transport. Now, I want to resolve this issue. I'm going to update this, but let's go look at the results first. So if we refresh this, we'll see that we brought in all of our 16 records. They're now there. And also within the preferences, we have the ability to turn on auto discover organization data in the people data, as well as any location information that does not exist within that people record. Now you're probably wondering, well, what does this people data file look like? Let's take a look at that. I want to show you how simple it is to work with this type of file. So here's the people CSV file. And as you can see from this here, a single CSV file. I know some of you are probably used to working with UDM, multi-tabbed. I think last I looked, there was 21 tabs in there. Very complex. You got to make sure you get it right. This takes a different approach. We simplify it because we know the information, where the information goes as far as the data pushes go. So we let the staging form and the workflow on transport take care of that for you. This also makes it very easy for someone to collect this data, or if you're going to drop this out of a legacy system to export it, you can paste it in here and quickly get the data in. So as you can see here, very straightforward. And what we're going to do is we're going to load an update into this example. So I wanted to show you the update we're going to load, because this is update 1. And you're going to notice Bob Backline right here. Let's highlight Bob's record so you can see what happens. Bob Backline is going to get an update along with quite a few other people. His phone number is now correct, and we now have him in his correct location. So we updated some of this data. So we're going to reload this file. These files become very important in managing this within the process. And a part of our enablement that we provide for our customers is the best practices, how to best align their data management approach and process to get the most efficiency out of transport and ultimately out of your Remedy ITSM environment for the value. Let's go back and load the update. So I clear my staging data. We already have people selected. I just changed the name of the file, which is on the server. I've placed it there. We just looked at the update of that. I import and transport. What it's going to do is it's going to bring in that file, and based on the match of the primary key, in this case, I believe it's login ID, company, and corporate ID, if I recall the proper key off of CTM People, we'll go ahead and update that record. Now, we follow BMC's primary keys. Whatever they've defined, we're going to follow for the data push. You'll notice that Leah Barnes' record has now been updated. There is no more error. We've included the right information. Let's go look at the results of this. So if I refresh, notice the phone numbers first for Bob Backline. It's 555-000. Well, that wasn't correct. It was just a placeholder. Now if I refresh, we brought in additional records. Bob Backline now has the appropriate phone number, and he is in the Seattle office as we now have that correct information in there. So this is a good example of being very iterative in our data loads. In fact, on some of my early projects working with transport, we wanted to get the data right away. If this is a brand new instance, brand new loading of this data for an organization, and sometimes people want to stop, clean up the data, transport really likes it when we can get the data very early on. We allow transport to help us find those issues and those errors. So that's the first part, is loading people data. Very straightforward. We realize a lot of people have LDAP capability. Transport ships with a pre-built vendor form that you can change out your current LDAP capability and leverage transports. There are some benefits to that, including allowing the setting of default profiles, which we'll kind of talk about in a few minutes here. There's also an LDAP data sheet on the EffectTech website that you can download and learn more about it. So let's move on to people permissions. Now, a part of this new group that we're adding to EffectTech is a change manager by the name of Michael Parker. Michael Parker currently is just a standard user, non-support staff. He did get a default profile, so you'll see what I mean by that is that we got a read license, no permissions, restricted to EffectTech, and obviously no support groups and functional roles because he's not support staff. What we're going to do in just a matter of a few seconds here, we're going to turn Michael into a change manager and then make changes to his record. Let's go do that. So we come back to the onboarding console. We select the other data link, which is the people permissions support staff, and we load this data file. Now, inside this data file is what is their login name, what is their corporate ID, what is the profile you want to apply, and you can have multiple lines for a user. Also, is this an add or an overwrite? And there are 2 removal actions. And then finally, what is their support groups you want to add, as well as company access restrictions can go into the file as well. We'll look at the file in just a few seconds here, but let's first look at the profile. You'll notice that Michael Parker right now was given change manager. Well, let's take a look at that profile before we look at the results. So right on the left-hand side here is a data admin. I have access to all of the profiles that are included with transport. When you install transport, you get several samples that we include as best practices. You can offline these, you can create your own. We just want to provide a starting point of some data for customers. So let's take a look at Change Manager. The Change Manager profile is global, can be used by any company being loaded. This is the license type we're going to apply. Unrestricted access is set to no. These are the permissions that are added. The support groups we're going to go ahead and get from the file, and we will say support staff. So Michael Parker's record will now be indicated as support staff. And we're going to give 2 functional roles. As a change manager, he needs change manager and change approval. Company access, we're not going to include in this one. Now, your profiles, you can break them down based on, is this a profile that will be only applications permissions? Will this be a profile that only has functional roles or company access? We created this as a data-driven approach that allows you to set something up that fits your needs and you can leverage it. But here's the great thing of this. We've loaded this data. We can load it again and make updates to it. And we're going to do that in just a second. But let's look at the results first. So now if I refresh this, we're going to see that Michael Parker is now a support staff, as well as Bob Backline, Valerie Chan, our catalog manager, and there is Michael Parker. So we now see Michael Parker's a support staff. He has his login access, fixed license. He has asset viewer, which came in with another one. So he actually got 2 profiles from the file. There was another one with, I believe it is service desk he had, as well as change manager. And he has infrastructure change master. Support groups came from the file. We'll see those in just a second. and then the functional roles. Now, one thing here I want to point out, let's say you loaded not only Michael, but we loaded another 100 people, and they're all getting access to be configuration management, change management access. And through the testing, they discovered that some permissions and functional roles were left out. That can be a challenge. The only way today, even if you use UDM, is you have to manually make those changes. That's a lot of people records you have to touch to make these changes. That isn't so with transport. It's much simpler, much easier. All we have to do is go and update the profile. Now, before we do that, let's actually take a look at the file. So the file that we use to make these changes, as I said, is very simple. It is what is their corporate ID, their user ID. Let's highlight Michael Parker's record. The people support staff file that we load with transport is very simple and easy to work with. As we can see here, it's minimal columns. What is their corporate ID, user ID, what profile, people profile that comes from transport. Most of the time you'll use an add. In this case down here, I think it's Peter Patel, his was set to an overwrite because he's being removed from all the support groups. He's being promoted to a director of something, and we're just going to set him back to an end user, and then we'll apply other profiles. So an override is really useful when you want to kind of reset someone's permission. Everything else is additive. Here are the support groups, and you'll notice Michael Parker actually has 2 in here, by the way. So that's where all the service desk capability came from. And what is the access company? And that's it, the file, that's all it is to it. So simple to load and manage people support staff permissions. Now let's go load this update and make the change. Now you recall here, Michael Parker's record as they were going through the testing is missing problem management access. They need access to problems. It was an oversight, someone forgot it, we didn't include it. That means if we had to make this change to 100 different users, you'd have to click through and add and update the permissions as well as the functional roles. Let's see how we can do this with transport and save time. All we have to do is go back into the onboarding console, select the manage people profiles, open up the profile we want to update. We set the permission change, allowing us to add what is missing in this case, which is problem management. There we go, that's the one I wanted. And we will also add knowledge, which I believe was missing as well. And knowledge is already there. Okay, knowledge submitter, that's what it was missing. Okay, we'll save that. So now those 2 new permissions are added, and let's go to the functional roles. So a couple things with the functional roles are missing. They're missing the broadcast submitter, knowledge management, and let's give them problem coordinator just to get us some additional functional roles. That's already been saved and ready to update. Now, I don't have to do anything else at this point. I don't have to touch the people records. All I have to do is go back to the onboarding console, pick the people data link, and we're ready to update, load the update. So we clear out our stage data, import and transport. It brings in the records, validates them, and pushes the data based on the changes to the profile I just made for Change Manager. Let's go look at Michael's record. When we view Michael's record, we'll see that now we have problem user, knowledge user, and the additional functional roles for broadcast submitter, as well as the problem and knowledge functional roles as well. Now that's just one user, but take and multiply this by the hundreds of users that were in this bulk load of data. I've saved significant time. This is very helpful whether you're going through an adding of new organizations to your ITSM environment, you're upgrading. It's also been helpful for customers going through the upgrade process as they change permissions around, or you just your day-to-day maintenance of large data loads that you want to change. And so that's the bulk loading and updating of people permissions data with transport. We still have one example we want to take a look at. So let's find SAM support. Sam's on my team. He joined a couple weeks ago. He is a work order implementer, but now he's ready to move on to the next level. He needs to be a change implementer as well as a service desk analyst for a certain group. Now, normally I would have to go and call the service desk or create a ticket and wait for them to make this change. But I now know about a self-service capability that I want to make use of as a manager. Let's take a look at that. A part of the install with Transport is we create a self-service offering that you can enable if you choose to use it. The self-service offering can even be renamed. There's some changes in customization to make, but bottom line, it allows you to put self-service people, support staff data management at the fingertips of those that need it most, whether it's your actual internal IT staff or potentially even those outside of IT. Now, as SAM Supports Manager, I need to request this access. Let's see how this works. So the advanced interface form opens up with the right questions I need to complete. We see profiles on the left-hand side here that are requestable. Now, this is not all of the profiles within Transport. We only choose those that should be requestable. There's a flag that you set that makes sure that they are visible for someone to request. So let's go ahead and put SAM in here first. Okay, so now I have Sam in there. We have his information, but I've forgotten what did he have again? I have 50 people on my team. That's right, he has work order user. We need to go ahead and make him a change implementer for a certain product line as well as a service desk analyst. So let's do that. So first of all, we'll go ahead and make him a service desk analyst. I now see all of the support groups, but this is only going to be for Effect Tech. So there it is, and this will be for networking engineering, and telecom. So he now can support those service desk tickets that come in. And then finally a change implementer, and we'll go ahead and do that for desktop support. Quite a diverse capability for his skill set, but you'll get the idea here. So now we have a summary of what's going to be applied to Sam's profile. And also in addition to that, let's say I just want to add an existing support group. I want to add him to the firewall team to receive tickets for work orders or whatever it is that you want. You can also add just support groups. Bottom line is you create the profiles that you would want your customers, internal IT or external, to be able to request via Transport. Click Submit. And SRM completes the approval and creates the appropriate service request. Now, for the sake of time in this demo, I've removed the approval. I did have manager approval on the service request, and I've taken it off of there for the sake of time. What this does is it creates a work order. Then on that work order, Transport has workflow monitoring for this specific information, and once it finds it, it takes that data and moves it into the staging form. Let's go look at the results. So if we refresh Sam's record, we're going to see the new permissions have now been added. He is now officially an infrastructure change implementer, as well as a service desk analyst, and he's supporting for the service desk. We'll see the new support groups that were added for firewall, for desktop, for networking and telecom, and also the functional roles that were included in that as well, which happens to be just infrastructure change coordinator that came from the change implementer. So hopefully you can see how easy it is to deploy self-service for people data management. One of our customers currently using this today has this as their #1 service request offering out of a catalog of 100 plus service offerings. It saves significant time, not only for IT, but for those of the business. So to summarize and wrap up, as we've talked about people data today, we've talked about and focused on how you can reduce your time, whether you're loading brand new data or making updates. You can actually run in parallel with your teams that are maybe working on SRM, SLM, and asset CMDB data, and you won't conflict with one another. You saw how simple it was to collect the people data or to load the people permissions data. And you can streamline the deployment of complex data. And we'll get to more of that in the demos that follow in this section here. Take a look at those videos on this page. But it also applies to your people support staff data and ensuring that data is consistent across all of your environments. Bottom line, because of the self-service capability that we deliver with Transport today, and there's more to come from the team, we lower your ongoing data maintenance, saving you significant time and cost for managing your Remedy ITSM environments. Thanks for taking time to watch this demo today. If you found this information really useful, but you would actually like to have a live demo and maybe take a closer look at this for you and your team, Feel free to reach out to us via our website and request a demo. Our solutions team will be glad to schedule a live demo and walk you through it and answer your questions. Thank you.